Here we are, time now for the AM News Review. We're joined by Kweku Paintsel, a lawyer. But right before we get into the papers and find out what they have to share with us this morning, let me let you know of that entity which always, in P will say, which always helps us to bring you this segment, Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. Now, for you, if you're a man, I keep saying, don't leave anything to chance. Nowadays, within the last 3 months, there are so many people I know, young people below 50, who have lost their lives. I'm not saying they're all related to prostate issues, but I'm saying that life is so fickle and you don't have to let anything go or leave anything to chance. So your prostate, right, it performs a pivotal function, not just in your reproductive cycle, but your general well-being as a person, which is why you ought to get yourself checked. If you're about 30 years, back then it used to be over 45, 50. Now, we're talking about 30 years. When was the last time you got your prostate checked? If you're a woman, what's your fertility status? Nowadays, a lot of people are coming down with fibroids and so many other complications. Do you know what your fertility status is? Well, for both, you can head to Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They're offering you treatment for these or scanning for these for free. Here's where you can find them. At Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard here in Accra. Then in Kumasi, Krodoma here behind the Angel Educational Complex. There's also Takrady Anaji State, Tema Community 22. There's Techiman Hanswa and Esiama in Zima. Now, I prefer that you give them a call. And these are the numbers you can reach them on. 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But just the start of the news review. And quite a number of interesting stories we're going to be getting into this morning. And when we have Kweku Paintsel joining us, we will actually have that confab with him. But let's start from the end of the Daily Graphic. Accra streets, death trap for motorists. Traffic lights dead. Urban roads battle to keep them on. And this is something that even this morning, this very morning, I experienced coming to work. This morning, just this morning. And there are so many of them, and it's such a pathetic situation because a lot of the time, you would have, drivers speeding, others wanting to weave into the roads, and it's so complicated. If you have been using the Presec end, or maybe coming from East Legon, from the Goyle area, it usually is the case until much later in the day. And sometimes even later in the day, it is the case. So you would need police officers to be on hand to assist. If you also use the Alajo Road connecting from the Tesano police training end, you would experience it there as well. This morning, I noticed it was saying for those coming from Alajo. So it's quite a tricky situation, and we can only hope that it is remedied soon. But per the story, some major streets of Accra are now death traps for motorists and pedestrians alike, as malfunctioning traffic lights have turned many intersections into chaotic scenes during peak hours. And I totally agree with that wording, chaotic scenes. If you've been there, you would know what I mean. A random check by the Daily Graphic team through the capital revealed that at least 123 traffic lights on 14 major routes in Accra were either not functioning, had poles without bulbs, or had their bulbs hanging on damaged poles. You would even see some of them sometimes. Again, one that I've been seeing lately. So unless you look at the one coming from the other end, you wouldn't know whether it's time to go or not, because the one there blinks both amber and red at the same time. Amber and red at the same time. So you now have to wait till it goes off here, and then you see the green on the other end of the road, then you know it's time to go. But of course, that's very confusing. And someone may come thinking the traffic light is not working, try and weave through, and then bam, accident. So the situation has left these intersections with regular heavy traffic that usually requires the presence of police traffic wardens. Okay? It's also another cost. Why don't we just fix the traffic lights? Now, the Department of Urban Roads says it is finding it difficult to cope with the extent of damage to the traffic lights in the capital, blaming human factors for the current situation. Human factors. Now, when contacted, the Department of Urban Roads did not seem to have any remedy in sight. This is my problem. They did not seem to have any remedy in sight, as it maintained that it was more expensive repairing traffic lights than installing new ones. So if that is the situation with these 123 traffic lights, at least these are the ones we know. How about the ones we don't know? So let's approximate and say they are about 200. If for all of them, fixing them is going to be more problematic than getting new ones, what are we waiting for? Do we need the level of carnage on our roads to go higher up before we realize, oh, it's a situation? I'm saying just this morning, I went through same. And you have to be very patient. Ordinarily, maybe the traffic signal would signal within a minute or a minute and a half maximum, or less, maybe 45 seconds. But here you are, if you're waiting for about 4 minutes and you can't cross because the traffic from the other end is just coming through, because your traffic light isn't working, the others are just coming through unabated, non-stop, and you have to wait. You would see taxi drivers and some others getting frustrated, wanting to cross, and that is where disaster strikes. So when? Till when? And my issue here, when contacted, the Department of Urban Roads did not seem to have any remedy in sight, as it maintained that it was more expensive repairing traffic lights than installing new ones. And this is where sometimes there is also the bit about logistical constraints. I know for a fact. They may not be saying it, but if the logistical constraints were not there, if they had the financial muscle, I want to believe they wouldn't have an excuse. But they would tell you about all of these other challenges they face, which sometimes makes me wonder, this country, what really do we prioritize? Because it appears a lot of the time we prioritize things that yield no results, like the SkyTrain bid that the minority is pushing now. We expended $2 million in there, so-called, research on feasibility and all of that. Even the trains on the ground we can't deal with. We don't even have proper systems, rail systems, when it comes to train technology. Yet we are thinking of sky trains. You see, sometimes it's just so we're bereft of ideas. We act as though we were so knowledgeable, when in fact, on the ground, it shows that we are actually very foolish. That's the reality. When in fact, on the back of fuel prices now, on the back of the cost of transportation, on the back of everything we're facing in our economy. Can you imagine, if you're watching me this morning, and if you have a good thinking cap on, economically speaking, can you imagine how much of a boost it would be if that catfish farmer somewhere in the Bono East region, or somewhere in the Ashanti region, or somewhere in the Volta region, or somewhere in the Central region, could easily get their produce to Accra to cut out the middlemen who may be extorting them? Yes, and that is the situation. You may have catfish that live bred is selling for about 30-something or 40 cedis, and it comes to Accra and it's over 100 cedis at the point and kill places. Look at the difference. Of course, those people add value to them, but look at the difference between the fish farmer who has to buy feed, has to take care of the fish to prevent cannibalism, because catfish, they are very cannibalistic, and so many other things. Imagine if they could do this via train, sustainably, efficiently, effectively. Imagine, for those who come from the eastern region to work in Accra and other places, if we had a proper rail system, what that would do to our economy. Weaving in products and human beings, what that would mean. But no, we wouldn't do that. We'd think of building castles in the air where pigs fly and say, we want a sky train. And here we are. So you expend $2 million on some feasibility study for a sky train that I want to bet my bottom dollar or my bottom CD will not see the light of day. It's some things you don't even need to be a rocket scientist to think through them. Yet we have issues on the ground like this one where human life is compromised. And oftentimes you would hear that there's no funding. Sometimes I wonder how we think in this country. And sometimes while I am so proud to be Ghanaian, sometimes it irks me at the same time that I am Ghanaian, because I've traveled around the world. And when you do, and you see countries with next to nothing and what they've done, and we are here sitting on everything and what we're doing, when I look at the youth, young people, and how they're suffering, straining, just to keep body and soul together, just to eke out a living, it really irks me. It really annoys me. And when our politicians parade themselves walking to and fro and talking about we've done this and we've done that and we've created X number of jobs and the situation is better, I just look at them, NDC and NPP, I just look at them and wonder. But I'll just end on this note. It shouldn't surprise us. Look at the economy of the politicians. The economy of our politicians is very different from the economy of the ordinary man. There are staffers at the presidency, less than 40, who a few years ago had next to nothing. Some of them have built 3 houses. And I dare anyone to come and try and I'll expose people. Yeah, someone less than 40, okay? Not really having done any work. Person becomes a presidential staffer, whatever, at the Jubilee House, and next thing you know, they're putting up this and that edifice and all of that. Where did they get that money from? You would probably work your entire life, and not make enough to put up a building. So, the economies are very different. But anyway, let me end this rant and move on to other stories. Sometimes I just get so passionate because the sort of information I'm bombarded with on a daily basis, and sometimes the pathetic situation in which we live some parts of our national life, most parts of our national life, really stokes my anger sometimes. But anyway, Attorney General inaugurates Registrar of Companies office in Kumasi. There's also oil fields to produce 120,000 barrels daily. That's according to the Energy Ministry. This story is not new. We spoke about it how many weeks ago? It's brought back. We want to see it rather than hear all the rhetoric about what we're about to do. Let's start doing that. So let me get to the story about the Attorney General, pages 16 and 17. And the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Godfrey Eboadami, has said the Office of the Registrar of Companies possesses the ability to be a formidable organ in the area of good governance and anti-corruption fight when effectively harnessed. He said it was therefore imperative for the ORC to have permanent offices around the country, stressing that the agency needed to be firmly established in every region and district of Ghana. So that's the rhetoric there. Also this story, our very own Hanan Abdul Wahab, CEO, National Food Buffer Stock Company, pictured there. So what's the story? Buffer Stock receives 100 million Ghana cedis to settle debt. You know, in recent times, there was a lot of talk from the suppliers, food suppliers, to the Buffer Stock Company for feeding in schools that they had not been paid for an entire year, 2022 and more. Now, the government has released 100 million Ghana cedis to settle part of the debt owed by the Ghana Buffer Stock Company Limited to members of the National Food Suppliers Association, suppliers of food items to senior high schools benefiting from the free SHS policy. The amount, which represents 50% of the total money owed the suppliers, had gone through almost all the processes, the Ministry of Finance and the Controller and Accountant General's Department, and will eventually be lodged in the accounts of the suppliers by Thursday, July the 20th, 2023. Now, in an interview with the Daily Graphic in Accra yesterday, the Chief Executive Officer of the GBSCL, Hanan Abdul Wahab, gave an assurance that the remaining 50% of the money owed the suppliers will be paid latest by August the 17th, 2023. So if you're a supplier and you're watching me this morning, that is the tail of the tape. Abdul Wahab is saying by August the 17th, you will be getting your payment. And that is the tail of the tape as far as that is concerned. So let's get into some other stories now. And even before we do, I just noticed Daily Graphic, your spelling of benefiting. I know the temptation is there is to use 2 T's in the spelling, but I think the editor should be watching that. Benefit, benefiting, benefited. Anyway, let's go on the international front and look at a few stories. Russia pulls out of Ukraine grain deal. This has been going on for quite a while now. It had to be renewed when the Turkey, basically the intermediary, as far as those two are concerned. And that allowed Ukrainian grain, wheat, among others, to reach other parts of the world that they were not reaching, creating some food shortages. So Russia has notified the UN, Turkey, and Ukraine that it will not renew a crucial deal that allows Ukraine to export grain through the Black Sea. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the agreement had reached a, quote, de facto end on Monday. The deal let cargo ships pass through the Black Sea from the ports of Odessa, Chornomorsk, and Yuzhny or Pivdenie. Now, Moscow said it would return to the agreement if conditions were met. Russian President Vladimir Putin had long complained that parts of the deal allowing the export of Russian food and fertilizers had not been honored. There's also the story, 2 dead after attack on Crimea bridge, and some Ukrainians have been accused of that, but Ukraine has basically refuted any blame in having a hand in that matter. UK relaxes visa rules to attract construction workers, and Britain has added a number of construction roles to its. So the story says rules. That is the headline. The story says roles. So let's see. Britain has added a number of construction roles to its shortage occupation list, allowing the building industry to bring in staff from abroad more easily to help employers struggling to fill positions. Bricklayers, masons, roofers. Okay, so I think it was roles that it should have been. Bricklayers, masons, roofers, roof tilers, slaters, carpenters, joiners, and plasterers will benefit from cheaper visas and more relaxed employment criteria under the changes. So I guess both rules and roles apply. That is it for the Daily Graphic newspaper. On the back page, Sunon Asogli supports emergency relief fund flood victims, and there's also philanthropist helps 30,000 in Bunkpurugu, Yonyo. Let's get into the Finder newspaper now, and there is NPP's 2024 victory hinges on candidate message and campaign style. That's according to Alan Kojo-Chabating. He's been in the Volta region, and he says he's the only person among the 10 who have been cleared to engage in that fight, if you like. Not a straitjacket fight, because it will be whittled down to 5 in terms of garnering votes for the NPP in the Volta region. There's also Akosia Menu files nomination to contest Adenta primaries. Lands Ministry denies engaging land guards to protect state land. I'll be getting into that story. And there's also passed the anti-LGBTQ bill without further delay. Moderator Global Evangelical Church says so. And there is 100 million Ghana Cedi GSDF grants disbursed to 105 enterprises for industrialization. That's a story I'll be definitely getting into. So let's start from page 4, then we'll go to page 5 and page 8. Page 4, where are you? Where are you, page 4? Okay, there you are. So here we are with that story. Let me start with the one from the Lands Ministry. So it says the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources on Monday dismissed media reports that it had allegedly engaged the services of land guards to protect state land. That is illegal, by the way. This was in a statement issued by the Public Relations Unit of the Ministry. Quote, the Ministry would like to set the record straight that government, and for that matter, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, does not contract the services of land guards in its operations. However, the ministry, through its agency, Lands Commission, legally engaged the services of INOC Holding Limited, a registered limited liability company, to assist in reclaiming encroached government lands. Now, the story says this engagement has been in effect since 2012, it's stated. On Monday, July the 17th, 2023, Alhaj Al-Hassan Suini, the Member of Parliament for Tamale North, alleged that the Chief Director of the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources had told the Parliamentary Select Committee on Lands and Forestry that the ministry had engaged the services of land guards to retrieve encroached state lands. And so that is the story from that viewpoint. Okay, so let's get into the other ones. We've done the one on page 4. Let's go to page 5 now. But Kweku Paintel, a lawyer, has joined the conversation. Mr. Paintel, a very good morning to you, sir. You probably have to unmute, Mr. Paintel.
Okay.
I can hear you now. I hope you're well, sir. Mr. Paintel. Hello, Mr. Paintel. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Right. I don't know for how long you followed the newspaper review for now. I don't know what you've heard from me, but if you have, what would be your thoughts on some of the matters I've started sharing? Traffic lights, many of them dead in Accra, urban roads battling to keep them on. About 123 traffic lights on 14 major routes. And this is even what the Daily Graphic was able to find out. We here at the multimedia group Joy News, we've done same in the past. And there's also passed the anti-LGBTQ bill without further delay. That's the moderator of the Global Evangelical Church. Maybe I'll just go into that story and then you can share your reflections with me. So the Right Reverend Prosper Samuel Jomeku, moderator of the Global Evangelical Church, has asked Parliament to pass the anti-lesbians, gays, bisexual, transgender and queer bill without delay. He said there was no reason for the prolonged delay in passing the bill since the three main religions in Ghana, namely Christianity, Islam, and African indigenous religion, abhorred such practices. He was preaching the sermon at the ordination service of the 32 ministers of the GEC at the Trinity Chapel, Kotobabi in Accra. Any quick thoughts on these two matters?
I think these matters have overwhipped, if I may put it that way, because at least in Parliament, we know that all the 275 members of Parliament last week, they had an opportunity to express any disapproval, disagreement, whatever. And from what transpired in Parliament last week, there's some unanimity among our parliamentarians, and they are it. After that, I know the National House of Chiefs have come to speak on this issue. Fair enough, people are disagreeing with some aspects, but that is what every law is supposed to be. It does not appear to me that we're ever going to have anything, any policy, any law that everybody agrees with. But if the majority of the people, all of our parliamentarians, exactly everybody wants the law to be passed. I personally also do not know what exactly is causing the delays. They told us many years ago that they were fine-tuning some aspects of the law, which is fair enough. But if there are special reasons why the law is not being passed, Ghanaians need to know. The suspicion is that there are interests. We're talking about Western countries, which are buried in conditionalities hidden from Ghanaians and so forth and so on, that is seeking to tweak the law. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, we'll get to a point. The point is that Ghanaians have overwhelmingly agreed and concurred that that law must be passed, and it will be passed. And possibly, I don't know, I don't want to speak too much.
But there is a bit of an impediment because there was a sort of stay brought to bear at one of our courts. I've forgotten exactly which one.
I know somebody has brought an action in the Supreme Court
that was triggered, and the Speaker of Parliament went ahead to have this sort of interaction in Parliament, for which reason he's being cited for contempt. You're aware of that?
Yes, somebody cited him for contempt, allegedly for presiding over Parliament when there was a matter in the Supreme Court pending the hearing determination. I would not even understand if that could be the reason. I understand and I know what contempt is, but I really have my problems and my doubt if the law was intended not to pass, or rather the application was intended not to pass any legislation in this country over that subject. I don't even know exactly what they are seeking for in that particular application. What I know is that people are disaffected, people are aggrieved, people do not want certain portions of the law, but there can be no blanket injunction on proceedings in Parliament. I really have my doubt, but if that's the reason why they are holding on with the discussion, I will not want to go further than that point. Fair enough. One of these days, that matter will be dealt with, and the ambit and the parameters and the scope of the release being sought in the court will be spelled out, and we will know how Parliament has to proceed from that point. So if that's the main reason, I don't want to push that point.
All right. Let's get into some other stories. And there is also 100 million Ghana Cedi GSDF grant disbursed to 105 enterprises. That story on page 8 of the Finder newspaper. And the Ghana Skills Development Fund has launched the disbursement of more than 100 million Ghana Cedis in grants to some 105 enterprises. $60 million in terms of targeting 700 enterprises. So let's look at that. The amount is part of a total of $60 million 5-year grant, which seeks to support at least 700 enterprises to upgrade the skills of their workforce for businesses in 4 windows. The 4 windows are the formal sector, informal sector, innovation and green, as well as science and technology. Now, each beneficiary under window 1, that is the formal sector, has the opportunity to receive as much as 800,000 Ghana cedis, almost a million Ghana cedis. And however, those in the informal sector have up to 88,000. So look at the difference. If you're in the public sector or if you're in the formal sector, 800,000. And those in the informal sector have up to 88,000. Just to cap off, so the beneficiaries under window 3, which is the training, innovation, and green, can access up to 1.2 million Ghana cedis. So lots of opportunities in here. And there's also talk about commencing the first phase of the 32 state-of-the-art TVET centers being constructed across the country. Congratulations to the GSDF and, of course, the TVET for all that they are doing in this respect. Let's get into the Daily Guide newspaper now. And when I do the stories here, lawyer, you can come in and react to them together. Government begins payment of food supplies. I've already made mention of that story. Let's keep NPP in power, Bawumia says so. But I would ask myself, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, yes, keep you in power, but for what reason? People must have just reasons to make certain actions. If you go to the market, you make logical decisions about the cost of this versus the cost of that, or the cost of the same product from different vendors. So why? That's the question. Oforiatta presents mid-year budget July the 25th, and that's something I'm looking forward to. Ken Oforiatta, still finance minister. Twin brothers on the run for killing friend, and Aisha Huang ran illegal company. Let me just do the story on page 6. You've already heard the headlines, and take your reactions as we wind. So, just a sec, Mr. Painter. So, twin brothers Farouk and Harus have allegedly stabbed their friend Al-Hassan Suleimana, 16, to death at a pub in Brekum municipality of the Bono region. The incident has since been reported to the Brekum police for investigations to arrest the culprits who are currently at large. Mr. Painter, I get, well, not surprised, but so many of these are happening nowadays. I really don't know what is happening. Your thoughts on these stories?
You're talking about the murders?
The murders and the other ones I have looked at. I'm talking about the GSDF and the over 100 million that they are making available.
Yeah, first, let me talk about the grant. The grant, like any other facility, financial facility, is essentially a loan which has to be paid at some point in time. The historical record that we have in Ghana is that the payment of loans, all these facilities, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's my observation. I may be wrong. Are typically disbursed along political lines. The beneficiaries of these facilities, once they receive them, they begin to consider it as some special thing that's been given to them, not necessarily, even if for the purpose that's stated on the record, as in some reward for, party political affiliation. And the record, if the banks will tell you, is that the default rates in the payment or repayment of loans and these facilities is in Ghana is among the highest in Africa. And that is a disincentive to the disbursement, or rather the grant of such grants to all manner of people, because these are intended to be some kind of seed fund. In other words, the thing has to grow, the base has to grow. And this can only happen if the people who become the beneficiaries of these facilities are able to pay back and, of course, comply with the terms and the requirement of these loans.
Right.
By the history of these grants, I don't have all the statistics, but the bankers will tell you, Ghana government must be able to tell you, the kind of disbursement that they do, they never pay back. I only pray, hope, and wish that this time around there's going to be some mechanism in place that would ensure, first and foremost, the viability of the project, the various proposals, I do not know. Please, I'm not going to teach anybody anything, but we are tired of meeting every year to talk about the same issues and the same problems over and over. I mean, that's why sometimes we do a lot of talking in this country. The viability of those projects that are proposed. Do people have pegs and things to ensure? Do they monitor? At what stage?
Yeah.
I hope next year by this time you'll be able to get the figures, the statistics of who got what, who has done what, and where have you reached in each one of them. That's about the problem that we're having. So that's just in respect of those funds, that have been disbursed. There'll be, Christmas is coming. You're going to see how it's going to be dispersed. Even for us as a country, way back from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when we started going to the World Bank, IMF, now we've gone to the state where they now tell you exactly what you must do. I don't know why we cannot use the same methods, the same terms, the same conditions, or even call it conditionalities in dispersing some of these things.
And those are questions, Mr. Painter, that we can ask for a long time on the back of the developments that keep going back and forth in the country. But thank you, Mr. Painter, for joining the conversation. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and we have to run. I do wish you could have joined us earlier, though. But we'll be getting
I'm sorry. I forgot about the time. I'm sorry. That's very bad.
We're okay with that. We know you usually wouldn't be late. But just as we move on to sports, let me just remind you that we have the Joy Business pre-budget forum today between 1 and 3 p.m. We have a number of speakers this morning. You don't want to miss that. It is between 1 and 3 p.m. Later in the day, Professor Godfred Bokpin, Mark Bedu Abuaje, Joseph Obengo of Guta, among others, will be on the bill. This segment always brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, and they're offering free screening. If you're a woman, fertility screening. If you're a man, prostate screening. Locate them here in Accra at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. There's Kumasi Kronomabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takrade Anaji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanso and Esiama and Zima. Call them on 0244 867 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But the start of sports up next.